is Fontail. I'm joined by Yeti here, and we're here to talk about Magic the Gathering. And we have way too much to talk about, and I don't know where to start. So I'm just going to ask a question. We're going to go from there, because this is a rabbit hole I have a feeling is going to be a nightmare the longer it goes.
The longer it takes, the more complex it's going to get.
To start, I'm going to ask the question I want an answer to, which is a weird one, which may not have an answer, which is, do you have a favorite card?
It's kind of funny because, like, as soon as you say that, there's actually 3 cards that come to mind. So, real quick, as for my background, I mostly play Commander. That is the one that has 100 cards, singleton, whatever. And some of the cards that I love in that are should have had impactful plays in some of my decks. 2 of them involve cloning your commander in Helm of the Host and Blade of Selves. Helm of the Host is an equipment, goes on a legendary creature. Every combat, you make a copy of it that is not legendary. So you get to ignore the legendary rule. Blade of Selves, when you attack with a creature that's equipped with it, it will make copies equal to the number of other opponents you have. So in Commander, you attack one person, make 2 copies of it. Those don't go with legendary creature, but you can still use it for like crazy combos.
So what's the third one?
The third one is a green-black creature called Underworld Lich. Quite simply, whenever you draw a card, instead, you look at the top 3 of your cards, pick 1 to go to your hand, the rest go to your graveyard.
This
It
is where
is an absolute beast of a value engine.
It is. And this is where you can tell that, like, our difference in Magic cards. So, I have a favorite card called Stonework Puma. It's literally just a 2/2. Has no special abilities or anything. It is technically an ally, so it adds to that. But the reason it's been my favorite is because of the quote that's on the card. I should pull it up, because that would be smart. I'm not going to, because I'm going to put a picture on here and I'm going to be stupid later on, but it's fine. But it essentially breaks down to we suffer uneasy alliances, unstable magic. Something you could truly trust is worth more than a pot of gold.
Okay.
When I was playing forever ago, back when allies were like one of the major sets that were out, I always enjoyed the synergies that you could create with them. I like things that react to other cards. Not necessarily in the sense that you're like spawning clones or anything, kind of like slivers or how allies do. I like things that just naturally react to each other, which is why I like cards like the werewolves and things that have things like where all werewolves gain blank, or werewolves you control get this, or vampires you control get. I like that kind of synergy where it's just like as a group they slowly gain weird combos. Though that's the type of synergies that I enjoy the most when it comes to Magic. And so for me, allies, they were slivers, but not as one note. At least in my experience with sliver decks, they're kind of, you go one route, you fucking turn out slivers. You got one way to go.
Yeah.
The best sliver deck? Well, you got all the sliver parts. That's it. Just go sliver.
So sliver decks are, one of those decks that's like simple to pilot, but also extremely strong, because there's no turning off that engine. As soon as your opponent starts getting slivers out, there's like almost no way to stop them. Yeah, let's describe it though. It's a tribal deck.
Yeah. On the flip side, the other type of deck combination that I used to enjoy a lot was, again, my commander deck, which was focused around the idea of when I first came across the circle cards, the different colored circle protection cards. That's when I came across 8.5 tails, and I was just like, oh, so you can make anything resistant to anything. That sounds annoyingly fun. And so I started just finding ways to not necessarily protect myself, but protect other people during a match with multiple players. So when somebody would do their whole big combo to destroy someone else's major piece, I would give them invulnerability to that spell type. And all of a sudden, you now have a bigger threat in the field to deal with, and I'm still fine because there's still a monster over there. But they can't hurt me with it because I can do the same thing.
So you play the politics of the game, which I absolutely love.
You kind of have to, because that deck really doesn't. It has a few ways to win, because I forget his name, unfortunately. I'll throw him up here whenever the heck I go into editing. I have the card that if you have over 40 life, you win, and things like that. So there are other win conditions in the deck.
Yeah.
It's just to like help it along if it can get there. But for the most part, the biggest way it wins is by helping somebody else take out a different player, giving me enough time to stall to then win.
What do you call that? It's called a group hug deck, where you're worried about like helping everybody out. You put this facade that you're like this helpful, benevolent being. and then you hit them with the win con.
I was never so deceptive with it, I'll be honest. I was I was playing with the same people every time, so they know what I was trying to do. And so it was less me trying to deceive them into trusting me, and more the person that I am helping survive also happens to be the person with a deck that if we allow him to live, will kill everybody else on the field easily, because his is an artifact deck that quite literally within like 4 turns will have over 100 tokens that are all indestructible and have death touch. The whole thing will just annihilate everything if you let it get any form of like ramping going. So everyone immediately targets them. So my first play is like, I'm gonna protect you for a bit. Why? Because you're gonna start destroying the universe. I'm just gonna let it happen. It's fine.
That just reminds me of the best deck I ever made. So there's a card, because you heard I mentioned that one of my favorite cards was green and black, right? That was in this deck, and it's a green and black deck with its only Thousandite. Her effect is simple. She comes to the battlefield, she'll make little insect tokens equal to the amount of creatures you have in your graveyard. And then you can pay some mana, sacrifice the creature, draw a card, gain a life. It's like extremely good value, right?
Yeah.
But her mana cost is very high, so people were just kind of overlooking it. I brought it in with my friend group, and it was a deck that I accidentally put an infinite combo into it. And the combo is to like make infinite mana, and once you get that infinite mana, you just win. That's the whole point of like why it was so competitive. That being said, if I didn't get that combo and people shut it down, I could still play a long game and make 30 tokens a turn. It was ridiculous. And here's the thing, I could make those many tokens with only 5 creatures in my graveyard. As I mentioned, I like some of the hosts, the Blade of Cells. They all work incredibly with Sony, since it lets you use her into battlefield effect over and over again. I used to have cards that would double the amount of tokens you could make. I would have cards that would, exile Estonia and bring her back by the end step, and just continuously make, again, in one turn, like 30 tokens. And it was one of those decks where it just got way too out of hand. There was a 3-hour game that I won with that deck. I had my graveyard exile removed from the game 3 times, and I still won.
Though the games that go the longest tend to be the ones that are the most engaged, so it's never a bad thing. The length of a game tends to be a good thing.
That's something like when a game goes so long, it's not just about how well you play your deck. It's like, how well can I politic my way out of this, right? Like, how well can I talk? Like, oh, I've had my graveyard exiled 3 times already. There's no way I'm coming back. And then next turn, like, oh no, I'm coming back.
It's like, oh, never mind. I figured it out. I'm back. What's up?
Listen, like, you have to have your plan. You have to have your way of like talking through to convince everybody that you don't have a plan. And it's like this thing like, hey, I can help you with that if you keep me alive, or I'm out of the game, so you can just focus on him, or just like, in a way, you're like both being deceiving, but also like and manipulating, but also kind of like also being honest with parts of it. That way you can. That's just how politics work.
It's called bluffing.
About the game.
You got to bluff to get your way in.
Exactly.
Stalling tactics activate. How long have you been playing Magic for?
So that's the funny part. It's like I was first introduced into the game like around 2013, but then actually start playing it like as much as I do until about, I want to say like 2016, 2017. I remember specifically it was the Guild of Ravnica cassette that I started like playing more.
I have a weird asterisk to when I started. So when I started playing was just as my high school years were starting, so around 2013, 2014, similar to you. However, I have memories of when I was much, much younger, because when I was in a weird school program, because the only school that was near me was way the hell far away. So it was a very weird school. It was not like in the middle of a town or anything. It was still a public school, but it was the weirdest one I've ever been to. And so it was before middle school and everything. I honestly couldn't tell you what year it was, but I have memories of collecting magic cards then, because for good behavior at that school, you got to get stuff out of this weird locker where you could basically earn points throughout the week, and then you could get like a prize for it. And magic cards were one of the prizes. So some of the oldest cards I own were from back then when I just randomly got them. But I know for a fact, as a kid, I had no idea what those cards were. I had no idea there was a card game about them until 2013 came around. And there was an event that actually got me into Magic, because I went to basically kind of akin to like a boys and girls club. It was called the Arbor, and it was basically like an after school program where you could use computers, do stuff like that. They'd help you with like interviews, resumes, generic kid stuff. And so I went there, and they had an event because the local comic shop basically came in and did a free draft tournament for all the kids. And basically you got to keep the deck that you built in the draft tournament. And so that was my first deck that I ever did. That was my first like proper introduction to the game. And the whole time I was playing, I was like, I know the back of this card. I've seen this before. This is a thing? I thought I imagined this. What is this? And so that was my first introduction was that whole free draft tournament. Probably also why draft tournaments have stuck in my heart. It's like the type that I enjoy the most, because where I excelled at was finding quick and easy combinations that worked and could beat other combinations. So draft tournaments for me were a level playing field because I'm a poor bish, and because I didn't have the money to match people with the more expensive cards. Like I said, most of the decks that I fought against were my best friend at the time, Chris's. His cards were worth more than most of the shit I owned. So he was sitting there with the expensive deck, whereas I was the bargain bin. As such, whenever I went into a draft tournament, it was even playing field. We all had the same chances. Yeah, somebody may get a good first draw, but that was just luck. And because of that, it meant from there I had to use the pieces that I was able to get.
Which I find it kind of funny how our introductions to Magic kind of shaped how we play it today. Because for me, when I was introduced, it was my friend that was like, "Hey, do you want to just try this out? You can borrow a deck, this and that." And like, sure, I'll give it a try. And like, he sat down, explained it to me. It's like, okay, let's do a practice run. And he was playing a Mer deck. Mer is an artifact-based deck. You can just get more Mers and whatever, right?
I love Mers.
And he did this. He just comboed out and completely decimated me.
Mm-hmm.
And here's the thing, usually that's like something like new players are like, oh no, I don't want to play because like I just got destroyed. Like for me, it's like, this is what you can do in this game? I'm getting in.
You're like, wait, I could see the gears. Give. I must invent my own.
Yeah, like that initial impression of the game is what stuck with me, which is why like these days I'll look at a card that just got spoiled or like just really got released. I'm like, how can I combo and how can I do this like flashy thing with this card, right? And that's kind of like where my mentality goes, and it's because of that first impression I had. Whereas you, like I said, your first impression was draft, and that's why you love that format.